Welcome to the Triskele podcast.
We are three druids gathered in a virtual grove
to share our thoughts and our path with you. Hi, Editing Amber here. Welcome to episode 10 of the Triskele podcast. If you're a new viewer or listener, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back and spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. Today we will be continuing our conversation about divination. 2 weeks ago, we started this conversation and we had so much fun discussing that we needed to split the conversation in half. Part 1 of the discussion is linked in the episode description if you'd like to check it out. Thank you for your continued support, and with that, let us jump right into introductions and continue this conversation.
Today we are talking about divination, but let's first introduce ourselves. So I am Victoria, and my pronouns are she and her.
I'm Drum, and my pronouns are he and his.
And I'm Amber, and my pronouns are she and her.
How much do you guys think the lived experience of the diviner affects the divination?
100%.
Absolutely.
I think that your lived experience impacts all divination. I mean, especially if you go into more open symbol sets or lack of symbol set methods of divination. You know, if you do any sort of scrying or, you know, that type of work, it's all just what's in your melon. There isn't a thing that says, if you're looking at fire and you see thing A, it means B. Like, it's all what you see. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of power in just owning that.
Yeah, I know we have some priests within ADF who actually use fire scrying as a method of divination as part of rituals. And I have never been to a ritual where that has happened because until recently I was on a completely different coast, but from those individuals who do that. But it always just fascinates me, that idea of that open symbol set, that like, you're putting yourself in a place to really just receive whatever the method of divination is sending you.
Right. I mean, admittedly, scrying is, in my personal practice, my preferred method of divination. I mean, I really love the symbol sets in different oracles, but the freedom to see whatever you're supposed to see and not be tied to a specific symbol or symbol set is really, really powerful, and really, it can be really emotional or really, really impactful, because you're not limited in what you can experience.
And I think the individual matters a lot. For example, I just reached over and picked up my favorite divination set. It's a pendulum. This is a really boring brass pendulum on a really crappy old piece of string. It was my first pendulum. It's very special to me. I have more. I have some really, really cool copper ones with gems on the inside. I have rose quartz one. I have a pendulum problem. But for me, so I should back up a little bit with some history on when I started getting into witchcraft. One of the things that I found was that I find myself very easily slipping into mediumship. And so the pendulum really helps me focus that, where I'm asking specific questions and getting specific answers in a way that, I mean, it's me, right? Like, I'm holding the pendulum. I suppose there is, I am not unwilling to say that maybe I'm moving it. But I'm not consciously doing so. And so it is that ability to talk to my unconscious and to my superconscious about what do I really think. And if I'm connecting to something beyond myself, whether that's an ancestor, a local spirit, a helper spirit, a deity, oh, you name it, full spectrum. What do they have to say in a way that isn't as filtered through my conscious mind, right? It's impossible to get, in my opinion, in my opinion, it is impossible to get divination that is not filtered through your lived experience in some way, form, or fashion. But finding the ways that aren't consciously filtered, I think, is also really important.
I think one thing that's interesting about divination, at least for myself, is that it's, we tend to look at divination as a singular event, something that we do right now. I'm gonna pull an omen right now. I'm gonna pull a tarot card right now, and that's kind of a very momentary thing. But I think another way of looking at it is what I call time stream. And that's not just the singular event. Let's say I pull 5 ohm or over a period of 5 days. It may not be 5 specific meanings over 5 specific days, but it may be one meaning stretched over a period of 5 days through that time stream, where you have to actually step back from the moment and take a look at it in its entirety to say, well, this is really not just a paragraph, it's the whole story. So I mean that's another challenge, and that's a filtering system as well, because we have the divination, and then we kind of divine the grander divination and try to pull meanings from it. I think context is really important. I know that recently I started doing work again with the Greek pantheon, and I had actually Amber helping me with the Greek alphabet oracle. And it was the Greek alphabet oracle I'd worked with in the past, and it was like impossible to get my head around it. It just really was. But in this context of working with the a Greek pantheon and working with Demeter, for example, it really clicked. It really resonated. It was like, oh my goodness, this really does speak to me in this particular way. So sometimes you have to take you have to put the round peg in the round hole, and magically it all makes sense.
To build on your comment about, sometimes write it down and look at it over time. I think sometimes it's also useful to get a second opinion. I mean, I know I've asked both of you to do this for me on multiple occasions, but of the like, I've drawn this thing. I've drawn this series. This is the 3rd time this week I've gotten this same omen. What is it trying to tell me that I'm not getting, right? Because I'm in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. I'm in the middle of the chaos. I'm at the same freaking desk every freaking day for offices and not getting to talk to other human beings at the moment, which drives me insane. So I know that I'm not, like, it's hard for me to be objective about myself. Mm-hmm. I can be objective about other people and other things, but I can't be objective about myself. Sometimes I can, but I have to be in a very different headspace than I have been for the last few months. And so being able to lean on people who understand divination and understand the systems that I'm working in, whether it's tarot or it's runes or it's, and I talk to other people for runes, these folks admittedly, or it's omen, like having somebody I can talk to about that really, really helps to get that second opinion. Some of that has to do about like doing divination for yourself. And so I wanted to sort of talk that a bit. There are 2 different schools of thought. I believe we are all of the same school of you can do divination for yourself, because I know we all do. But there are people who say you shouldn't. And there are times, I think, when you shouldn't. So I want to talk about that a little bit.
A lot of times, for me, the times you shouldn't do divination for yourself are those moments where you are in the midst of things. Like I don't want to use the word lost necessarily, but you're not seeing the bigger picture. You're kind of focused on, right here, right now. And so trying to do divination, you're only going to see right here, right now. You may not be able to look at it as a bigger picture thing. But I think those are those moments where if you write it down and go back and read it in 6 months, that might suddenly make a lot of sense. I mean, I've done journaling for my divination for years, and there's times where I'm like, I don't know what the heck any of this means. And I'm reading through later and I'm like, Amber, you're dumb. Like, how did you miss this? But it's all that hindsight. Like, now I can look back and be like, oh, that's what was going on. Oh, that's what I was missing, because I'm not in the midst of it anymore. So, I mean, to me, sure, there's probably times you shouldn't do divination, but to me that also doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
For myself, I rarely will use do divination for myself using a closed system. I find that for myself, to find answers or insights, I'll use an open system. I run every day, so I really use the sky and what I see in the sky and what crosses my path along my run. Those are really important things to me, and I derive a lot of information from that. I find that if I draw an omen for myself, or draw the Futhark outside of a ritual context, it's very hard for me to make sense of that. So I love to read for other people. And for myself, it's hard to use a closed system for myself, but the open system I find exceptionally insightful.
And I find the daily draws are incredibly practical.
Very.
Let's draw the omen. That means the end of a short cycle on a Friday. Really? That's a shock. And there are days where I'll ping drum and go, tell me there's more than this. Like, is there more than this really obvious thing? And he'll be like, sometimes it's just obvious. Sometimes it's more. I'm like, great. It doesn't help. I don't know.
Okay. And honestly, that response there is why I, outside of like ritual stuff, I do it weekly. Like Monday mornings, I pick a random box of stuff and do my divination for that week. I always do a 3 symbol draw, whether it's 3 discs or 3 cards or whatever. And I stick to that weekly because that at least lets me step back a little bit and get a little bit bigger picture. I also learned early in my clergy practice that if I were to draw a card in the morning and that card essentially said, hey, this is a crappy day, it was a crappy day. Whether it was going to be or not, it was a crappy day. And it really, it had a really negative impact on my outlook. And I didn't like that. It's a lot easier to look at something and be like, okay, this week may be hard, but it's a whole week. Like I can smooth it out. That's okay. But it's that like every day you wake up, and especially in those times, because we all have those times where you pull a symbol and it's the same symbol from yesterday. No matter how much you shuffle the deck or spin the cards or, whatever, it's that same symbol. And so yesterday was a crappy day. You pull the same symbol. So for me, I had to back off of it just for my mental health, honestly.
I think for me, that's why I use the ohm in the morning. So I do a daily draw of ohm because there is no ohm to me that is, this is a crappy day. Right, so there's. I'm not going to get into that trap.
I use the Greek alphabet oracle, and that people call that the doom and gloom.
Heard that can be challenging.
Yeah. I mean, it can be. I love that symbol set, but there's a lot of really harsh realities in that symbol set. And some of them have been reinterpreted because my lots have their own little personality and think they're really funny. But,
Although that's a really good point, though. I mean, so I know when I work with the runes, like to me, the runes are, I'm going to tell you as it is, and there's no holding back. And if I got to smack you upside the head, I'm going to smack you upside the head. Like runes are really practical, really forthright. Whereas I find the tarot and the ogham to be a little bit more like, all right, honey, we got to think about things this way. Maybe like change your perspective a bit. And the approach to me, at least the way maybe it's just the way I interpret them, has a different personality, if you will. Do you guys find that like different sets, and maybe even if it's different tarot decks, because I know that there's tarot readers out there that are like, this tarot deck is when I want real shit, and this tarot deck is when I'm really feeling vulnerable and I want somebody to hold my hand. Mm-hmm. Like, do you find that different decks and different systems have different personalities and how you work with them?
I do. I know that I have I have a lot of different sets, and many of them are made of wood. and some of them are this type of wood, and some of them are this type of wood, and I think that it makes a difference to me what the type of wood is. And they do have their own personalities, but I think it's a lot of it really is context, because it's a question of how you're looking at it. Because depending where you are, you're doing a reading, and if you're in the moment and you take a look at it, and the sun is behind you and it's casting a shadow, and you're like, wow, this is I'm in shadow, and I look at you from behind, and I say, wow, you're bathed in sunlight. So it's a question of, we're seeing the same things, but the context is a little bit different. Same thing with the decks. I think that they can talk very differently, and sometimes you have to reflect on them. Sometimes you have to take away and step away. But I know I have certain decks that if I want the hard reality, those are the ones. And I have some that are I consider much more ceremonial, and if it's high ceremony, that this is the special one I'm going to use. So I also have the first set that I ever made, so it's kind of my return to roots set. It's like, let's get back down to it. I know one thing I have to do with when I do readings is I really do have to kind of clear my mind. Because with the oem, if I do not clear my mind, I will pick I'll pick that. I know there's a specific oem, I'll pick it every time if I don't clear my mind, because I'm drawn to it. It's just like glue. It's like I put my back, probably if I had 1,000 ohm in there, I'd still pick that one out. I think it's really important to kind of clear yourself and just be open to what's going to come to you. Kind of the cosmic switchboard thing. And I think that if you know the number you're dialing, it makes it a little bit different than if you just let the numbers pick themselves.
That's a really good point. I mean, do we have rituals that we do before to clear our minds, to put us in the right space?
I don't know that I'd go so far as saying ritual, but definitely, taking a deep breath, or, I mean, sometimes I'll say a prayer to a deity of divination, but more often than not, it's just that, like that grounding myself and like being present in that moment.
I know for myself with my oem, because they're discs, they're in a bag. I breathe onto the bag and I call upon the spirits of the oem. With tarot, I'll knock the deck 3 times, either on the table or with my knuckles or whatever. Yes, technically that's a ritual, but it's not particularly elaborate. But it is this thing that I do every time that kind of like triggers my brain to go, okay, we are now in divination space. Let's do the thing.
I'm also a breath person, as Amber described. I find that breath or 2 or 3 really helps kind of clear the day. And I also, since I use a bag with oem or futhark or whatever the case may be in it, I find as I put my hand on it and I move them around, that sound of the clicking of the discs gets me in kind of a mindset. And then at some point that clicking gets me to the point where I'm like, okay, now it's time to draw. So there's no science for it. I can't say, well, you must wait 4.3 seconds and then it's time to pull.
Yeah. No, it's actually really interesting though to hear you say that you'll pull the same symbol, because I mean we've had that conversation, but I have the same experience. So if I'm not actually focused on what I'm doing, if I just reach in and grab a disc out of my Greek alphabet oracle, same symbol every time. Like my discs have a personality, like they're this little creature. They drive me crazy and I love them, but man, they mess with me.
I know there are many runesters who, I'm actually one of them, who believe that each of the runes have their own spirit. So there's a spirit of Uruz, there's a spirit of Gabo. I'm not sure they're not wrong for every single system. Like, maybe they don't have their own spirit with their own agency. I think the runes are slightly different because of how they came about and the mythology around them and how people treat them. At least different from the tarot. I don't know enough about the Greek oracle. I know the Greek oracle exists, and that it's a bunch of Greek letters, and that if I have a question about it, I ask Amber. That is my extent of the Greek oracle knowledge. But certainly I do believe that there is a spirit of the oem, but whether that's one spirit or each individual one has a spirit, I haven't like parsed that yet in my brain. My little animistic brain that believes that everything has a spirit, including, my electronic keyboard that's sitting over here at the side, who mocks me on a regular basis. But I don't play often enough. But like, what do you guys think about, like, do divination systems have spirits? Do the cards have spirits? Do the symbols have spirits? Or is there, like, you just sort of have this divination energy thing that happens?
I think it's kind of all of the above for me. I think that I think each one of the ohm has a very individual spirit. Maybe I'm a hard ohm person. But I think that, I think if I pull, regardless of which set I'm using, if I pull this ohm in any of those sets, I have the same image of what that means, that same feeling about it. So I think that there is a sense about each of the individual ohm that it has a kind of a spirit about it.
So it'd be tied more to the symbol than to the like disc or the card itself. Is that?
I think to the symbol, yeah.
I know for me, the runes are tied to the symbol, not to whether it's a card or a disc or whatever I'm using. So we've talked a bunch about divination and how we actually do it and the different symbols we use. And so now is the time to actually do some divination as we pull some cards and talk about what's coming up for the next few weeks. So Amber is going to kindly use, which deck are you using today, Amber?
I think we're going to use the Magic Moon Oracle deck. So they're really beautiful cards. So the backs have the different phases of the moons. So let's see what we can pull out of here this week. So we start with share. Take a moment. Share your story, share your wealth, share whatever you can with those people around you. It's really important to take the time to share what you have with others. We have the comfort seeker. So as you're sharing, maybe find comfort in those moments, and that while you may be the one giving gifts, you can find comfort in the relationships you're building by giving those things to others. And last, we have the plan. So I think really what this is trying to say right now, so we're sharing and we're finding comfort, but even though we're finding comfort, that doesn't mean that it's a time for inaction. It's a time that we need to kind of be looking to the future and see what can we do, where can we share, where can we find comfort. We're approaching the end of the calendar year, so maybe look ahead and kind of see what's the future hold, what do you have next. And so I think that that's kind of where we're at. Share your story, find comfort in those people around you, but take the time to plan for what's ahead. That's what we got today.
And I think at this time, and I know we don't normally bring the current world environment in, but in this world of pandemic, with many of us looking to a second lockdown or in the middle of a second lockdown, as I am, that really sort of planning how you're going to find those connections and how you're going to share and keep those connections alive is really important. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great omen.
I do too.
I would also like to remind folks in the concept of sharing that if you do enjoy our podcast, please share it with your friends. Rate us on your whatever you listen to us on. And although please rate us on YouTube if you are watching the video, and on why is my brain not remembering the main podcast?
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all of your favorite podcast listening stations.
Please also rate us wherever you are listening to us or watching us, to make sure that other people can find us, and do tell folks about us. And maybe in 6 months, when folks are asking for nominations for the Witchies, maybe remember us. Hopefully we are still entertaining you in 6 months. And fun.
Absolutely.
Kind of crazy.
It's kind of how we exist. Kind of fun and kind of crazy.
Absolutely.
That is sadly, not sadly, entertainingly. That's very true.
Yes.
And if you are in the midst of a lockdown and you find your world is the four walls around you, you'll find that divination will help open up those walls and open up that world to places you might not usually go. So, interesting places ahead.
And I do want to please remind folks, as we're talking about the lockdown, if you need help, please reach out and find that, whether that is professional help or help from your friends or help from a random group of Discord folks. There are lots of servers out there that just go to Discord, search for your whatever you're interested in, reach out, find people to talk to. Don't let this get to you. All right. And so I think on that exciting, uplifting, we will be back in 2 weeks. If you'd like to speak to us, you'll find all of our contact information down below or in our podcast notes if you're listening to us on audio. And please feel free to reach out to us on those channels. I know certainly Instagram is one of my favorite places to hang out, and Discord. So reach out, chat with us, and let us know what you think of this podcast and if there's specific topics you would like us to cover. We have a list, but we're always willing to add additional topics and to shuffle things around. So thank you so much for listening to us today or watching us, depending on whichever one you did. And we will see you all in a couple of weeks. So bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's video. If you liked this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. You can also find more episodes on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast providers. You can find us on social media on Facebook and Twitter, or for more information, visit our website, triskelepodcast.weebly.com.